Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today is January the 2nd of 2018, and today I'm home and I'm just kind of snuggling up with my daughter. It's my rest day from my workout, so I thought I would share with you guys two of my most favorite marriage or relationship tips that I have found to be extremely helpful in my own personal marriage, things that I have kind of advised other people on that's also helped improve their relationships in marriage, and so I thought I would share those things with you. So I have been in, I'm 42 years old, so I have been in a few relationships, and I am in my second and last marriage, Lord willing. And I've just learned a lot of things about people and relationships. And also I learned a lot of mistakes, made a lot of mistakes of my own that I've learned from. And so to me, these are two very valuable tips that will help you in your relationship or your marriage. So the first thing I want to talk about is infatuation versus actually being in love. Now, a lot of people get those two confused a lot. Me, I'm sure, guilty at some point. So I'm bringing that up and talking about that because often I hear people say, oh, well, I'm not in love with him anymore, or I'm not in love with her anymore, or we're falling out of love. This is why we're having all these issues, because I'm just not in love anymore. And so to me, there's infatuation and there's actually being in love. One will stick, one will not. Can you guess which one? Infatuation. Infatuation is usually what most relationships start off at and what people mistake for being in love. Infatuation. Infatuation is when you're just so sick about a person, like you get, love sick, you can't think about anybody else, you can't do anything else, you just always want to spend time with this person. You have the butterflies, and the sex is amazing, and he gives you goosebumps, and just all of that crazy stuff that we all hopefully have the opportunity to experience once or twice in our whole entire life, because it is a great feeling, but it's not a lasting feeling. Infatuation does not last. Being in love, in my opinion, does last. So to me, the definition of being in love is giving your heart completely to someone, committing yourself 100% to that person in a monogamous relationship, putting forth effort every single day in that relationship. Of course, there's nurturing, there's loving unconditionally when you're in love with someone. There is kindness and understanding. All of those types of things to me is what defines being in love. And those things can last forever. Infatuation and those other things that I mentioned, like the butterfly feeling and the sex always being great, and you guys having sex like every single night of the week, and not being able to function without this person being near you, that's infatuation, and those feelings will not last. They're only temporary. But the other feelings that I mentioned about being in love, those things can last. So that's the infatuation versus being in love. And that's where a lot of people make mistakes in their relationships or their marriage, because they think that in order for your relationship to be successful, you must always feel like you're infatuated with someone, hence being in love. And that's just not the case. That's not true. That's not realistic. Even in relationships with people who have been married for 40, 50 years or 5 years, I think most couples will tell you that you go through phases in a relationship, especially a marriage, where you're not always in that infatuation mode or phase. And people mistake that for not being in love. So there are phases in marriages where you're not always going to feel, you know, that butterfly feeling. You're not always going to, you know, have the roses and the candlelight dinners and the wine me, dine me. That doesn't mean that you're not in love with that person. So I think that's one mistake that a lot of people make. Not knowing the difference between being in love and being infatuated with someone, and thinking that the infatuation stage or phase is supposed to last forever through a relationship, because that, like I said, that's just simply not realistic to always feel like that. I don't know of any relationship, any couples, your power couples, your most beautiful couples, your celebrity couple, whoever, that can honestly say that every stage in their relationship, or for however many years that they've been together, that they can honestly say that they've always felt that way throughout the relationship. There are times when in a relationship you can get content. You can find yourselves going through the motions. Life can get busy, hectic, chaotic. You might have kids, you both are working, you might be going through school. So it's unrealistic to think that you'll be able to give your time, energy, and attention to your significant other, your spouse, your partner 100% of the time. And quite frankly, that's exhausting. No one's capable of doing that, but that does not mean that you don't love that person or that you're not in love with that person. Which brings me to my second tip, a big misconception that people have about relationships and their spouses, is that you feel like that person is responsible for your happiness. Again, I've heard people say, well, she just doesn't make me happy anymore, or he doesn't make me happy anymore. Things have changed. He doesn't make me happy anymore. And I'm here to tell you that you have to stop thinking that other people are responsible for your happiness. You have to stop thinking that you need to be loved so much all the time or you're not happy. You have to stop thinking that you need somebody else's attention all the time or you're not happy. So what I will say about that is, to put it very, very bluntly, get your own life. And I say that with much, much love, because that is a lesson that I have had to learn myself, is that you cannot put the responsibility and the burden on somebody else to bring you happiness, to determine your happiness or your purpose. You have to find 100% happiness in yourself first. You cannot and should not put that responsibility on somebody else. Your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife, your partners. That is up to you. And that's kind of when the light bulb went off in my mind, and when my marriage started to really, really improve, and I personally just got, I became a much better person, a much better wife, and a much better mother when I realized that I cannot, you know, put the burden on somebody else to make me happy. I had to get my own life. I had to find my own purpose, my own self-worth. I had to start doing things again that I loved, you know, whether it was my hobbies or going back to work or volunteering or whatever. You know, it's simply not fair to put that burden on somebody else to make you happy all the time. Who can do that? It's just simply not fair. So when you become responsible for your own happiness and you stop letting somebody else define your happiness, you have so much more to bring to the table, so much more to bring to the relationship, so much more to give. And you also won't find yourself unhappy or disappointed as often, because that person that you've been relying on or depending on to make you happy, as soon as they start doing anything different, or like I said earlier, not giving you 100% of their attention all the time, then you start questioning yourself or the relationship, or what am I doing wrong, or what's he doing wrong, because, you know, I'm not happy. And a lot of times what I find is that people give so much of themselves, sometimes all of themselves, to their spouse, to their significant other, that they lose who they are. And they let the other person define them, or define their life, or define their happiness. So I'm saying to you that you need to get your own life, and you can't depend on somebody else to make you happy. You find happiness within yourself, and a lot of times that can be from, you know, being able to do things that you love to do without your spouse, without your significant other. You know, not giving yourself 100% to your spouse or your significant other. Now, I'm not saying you don't share your life. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be with someone that you have the same interest with, that you know, have things in common with. That I'm not saying you don't do things together. I'm not saying any of that. I think you all know what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's healthy for anybody in any relationship to lose themselves in a marriage or a relationship, to stop doing certain things that they like to do, that they enjoy doing, hobbies, pastimes, hanging out with friends, relatives. I don't think that people should stop doing that, because when you do, that's when you lose your identity. And at first it seems like it's great and like that's how it's supposed to be. But then you start to resent your partner when you take a step back and realize, well, geez, I've given my whole self to this person and I've kind of lost who I am. I don't do the things I enjoy anymore. I've given up friends, or I don't travel anymore. So you have to stop relying on other people to make you happy. When you take responsibility for your own happiness, like I said, you will bring so much more to the relationship and so much more to the table. You know, people in relationships, some marriages, some don't last forever. People break up, people get divorced, spouses pass away. And so, you know, think about that. If you give 100 of yourself to somebody else, and you let that other person define who you are and your happiness and what your purpose is in life, where is that going to leave you when something, or if something happens to that person or that relationship ends? What are you going to have left? If you don't have your own self and your own happiness. So those are two of my marriage tips. To recap, relationships, and especially marriages, they go through phases. It's not always going to be the honeymoon phase. There are going to be times when you feel bored with each other. There's going to be times when you need space from each other. There's going to be times when, there are going to be times when, you know, you're not all over each other and having sex every single night. You know, every relationship and every marriage goes through those stages. Now, here's the big question. What do you do when that does happen? And how do you prevent it from getting bad or worse and leading to a breakup or to, unfortunately, divorce? And here's what I'll tell you about that. Because it is completely normal for relationships to go through those phases, the most important thing I think that couples need to do is be aware. Recognize when those things are happening. Although they are normal phases, you have to be so in tune with your spouse or your partner that you're aware that this is happening. You may be like, you know, hey babe, it's been a couple of weeks since we've had some alone time in the room. You know, we might need to turn off the TV an hour or so earlier tonight and head to bed a little early. We haven't been on a date in 3 weeks or a month. You know, we might need to call mom over to come babysit while we go out to dinner and have a date night. So you need to be aware of what's happening. Don't get so comfortable and don't go through the motions for very long. Not to say that those things don't happen, because they do. But when you notice and you recognize those things are happening, you have to put in the work and the effort to get out of that funk, to get out of just going through the motions. You have to put in the effort. And you have to leave open the line of communication, and you have to be able to feel comfortable going to your spouse, going to your husband or wife and saying, hey, you realize what's going on here? Like, we need to kind of put forth a little more effort, and here's what I think we need to do, or what do you think we need to do? So being aware of your relationship and what's happening in it, being in tune with your spouse, picking up vibes, signs from them if they're feeling a little bit needy or neglected, and working on it. So, you know, the infatuation stage is not always going to last, but I truly believe that you can always be in love if your definition of being in love is unconditional love, trust, understanding, nurturing, kindness, sweetness, putting in the work and committing yourself to that person. That is being in love, and that is everlasting, or can be. But the infatuation stage is just a phase. It's just a stage. It will not last. Do not rely on that. Do not think that there is something wrong with your spouse or your relationship or your marriage if you're not always in that infatuation stage, because it's just not realistic. And secondly, again, to recap, do not rely on anybody else to determine your happiness. Do not put that burden on anybody else or that responsibility on anybody else. That is your responsibility to own your own life and to own your own happiness, and to find out what that happiness is, to find out what your purpose is. You know, a good relationship, a good spouse is supposed to accent you, you know, be like a really beautiful accessory to an outfit, compliment you, but they're not supposed to define you. And you're still supposed to be okay if you're not being smothered and covered with this person 24/7. So get a life. I mean that with love. I personally had to learn this when I just pretty much lost myself, being a stay-at-home mom, being a wifey, being a business owner, especially a mom to a special needs daughter. You know, I gave up everything, and I just want to encourage you not to do that.